Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics well, no sooner had I put the last video up than the news broke that the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, had initiated a ruling regarding Theresa May's potential for a third vote on her deal. And it's been widely reported that this is him saying she can't have a third vote on her deal. And of course, every second comment on the video is to do with this. So I'm thinking, well, I should probably do it early rather than later. So let's hope nothing else breaks tonight that I'd have wanted to put in here. Basically, it's not quite as it seems. It sort of stops her putting it out there without any changes at all, but that's no bad thing. But yeah, as with anything else that's coming out of the Commons at the moment, it's not quite as straightforward. What he's actually ruled, he can't rule on the deal or the MP's ability to vote on it. What he has ruled is that she cannot present substantially the same motion as she did last week. It has to have substantial differences. Now, before I get into the implications of that, I have to say I am once again disgusted by the behaviour of some MPs, including the Prime Minister. So just to recap what I said in the video yesterday about this very topic, John Bercow is really carrying out his duty here. There is a convention which is over 400 years old that says an MP may not bring the same motion up for a vote that has been defeated in the same session of Parliament. Now, I did also say that, to be honest, if it were me, I'd have done it. I'd have rather taken the stick for failing in that duty than to face the barbs of lying politicians by not doing so, particularly on such a constitutionally important matter. I rather think I would have lacked his integrity on this matter. However, it has to be pointed out, he has stood up to the government before, even though he belongs to the government party, and he is, retiring this summer. So in some ways he doesn't give a crap, but at the same time he could get an awful lot of abuse over this. Now, in reacting to the ruling, the Prime Minister's own spokesperson said that the Speaker, and I quote, did not warn us of the contents of the statement or indeed the fact he was making one. Now, as to warning about the contents of the statement, well, he's now warned you because he's given the ruling at least 2 days before the Prime Minister was going to have the motion voted on, and at least one full day before she was even planning on proposing the motion. But on the other part of it, the fact that he was making one, that is an outright lie. Last Thursday, there was a motion to ban the Prime Minister from bringing the deal back for a third time. In other words, there were enough MPs who wanted to actually stop her doing this that it was worth going up for a vote. And at the last minute, that motion was pulled because MPs were saying that, hang on a minute, the Speaker has a ruling to make on this matter. This was clearly communicated in the Commons, where every single fit and able member of Parliament was in attendance, and the Speaker himself stood up and confirmed that he would indeed have a ruling to make if the Prime Minister brings the motion back to the House again. I talked about this. In fact, he's actually been quite generous in giving a preliminary ruling today. He hasn't actually seen the motion. He hasn't seen the wording of the motion, so he can't actually rule on it yet. He could have just waited until he saw it, probably last thing tomorrow if she wanted the vote on Wednesday, and then given his ruling. So for the Prime Minister to then get her mouthpiece to say that she didn't know about that there was even a ruling taking place was reprehensible. Not only if I know that by convention you can't just bring another motion to a vote like this, then she does as well. And if there was any chance she didn't, someone would have told her by now. And also, she was there when the Speaker stood up and made a big song and a dance about the fact that, yes, this motion's been pulled because actually I have to make a ruling on this. It's another classic example of shifting the blame for the entire process, because she's not trying to convince people in Parliament she didn't know. She's just trying to convince the public who didn't watch the proceedings last Thursday. And this is something the Prime Minister and others have gleefully engaged in. But in her particular case, since her running down the clock strategy, which began basically about half a year ago, it's almost like she's just waiting for someone else to intervene so that she can go, oh, it wasn't my fault. I totally tried to do Brexit, but and now maybe she has her fall guy. But the deal was not going to get through this week. I'd already mentioned that she basically needed almost all of her MPs and the DUP to sneak it through. She could sort of count on 7 MPs off the opposition benches, not counting the DUP. 3 Labour MPs kept voting for it. And the first time round, one independent, I think, voted for it. And this time round, it was 4, maybe a couple of others. But that doesn't leave room for very many Tory rebels, not very many at all. And there were all, and first of all, she hasn't got the DUP's support. And even if there is pressure on them to support it, and she's doing her best to bribe them, and the Attorney General's doing his best to try and convince them that, yeah, totally legal, we can definitely back away from it. Yeah, I know I wouldn't say that in Parliament, you know, I don't want to say it in Parliament, but I'll say it privately to you guys. Yeah, totally, we can get out of this. Even then, the DUP are still very hesitant about it. And then she'd need all her Tory rebels to vote for it as well. And over the weekend and today, there have already been enough Conservative MPs saying that they still do not intend to vote for this deal to sink it. Even if she somehow got the DUP on board, she doesn't have enough of her own MPs without relying upon more MPs from the opposition benches to back it. And that's not realistic. So even if it had been brought for a vote and the Speaker had allowed it, which, as I say, I probably would have done just for a quieter life, even though technically it shouldn't, it still wouldn't have passed unless those MPs were lying. And I also object to this blurring of the lines between fact and reality. Like Boris Johnson, for example, saying, oh, yeah, there's still time to renegotiate the backstop. She should totally do that. Various Brexiteers making legal cases for being able to unilaterally leave the backstop. The Prime Minister herself saying that the Speaker is out of line for making this ruling today. In many ways, a population can be a bit like children. Like if both parents of a child offer them different values, then the child picks the one that suits them. Because, well, they're getting different values, so obviously it's a matter of opinion, isn't it? The same applies here. When one group of politicians or a section of the media, I can't wait to see the headlines for tomorrow, they say one thing and then another group of politicians and or the media say another, well, then the public just think, well, it's a matter of political opinion then, isn't it? Although if it was a matter of fact, then they'd all agree, wouldn't they? But no. So they get this blurring between political opinion and legal fact. And it blurs those lines. And now John Bercow is, as I foresaw yesterday, going to get an incredible amount of stick over this for doing his duty. So what could substantially change the motion? How could she still get this to be voted on? Because she could. The Kyle Wilson motion amendment, is one that I've already discussed a couple of times. I'll go through really, really quickly. I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm not going to suggest that that would substantially change the motion, but God, surely it would. Surely it would, because effectively the motion would be for a referendum. So basically what it means is that in return for support from the opposition benches, Theresa May would say that her deal goes to a final vote for the people, to a referendum. And then you might say, well, what is the point of MPs voting for her deal if it's then just going to go to a referendum anyway? The reason is, let's say we had a second referendum. Let's just say that was it. Nothing to do with May's deal. But May's deal was one of the options you could vote for in the event of leave. So let's say a majority voted leave. Unlikely, but let's say. And let's say of the, the majority of people said, okay, if we have to leave, or if we do leave, because I want to leave, actually, I'll leave with May's deal. Then, remember, a referendum is not legally binding, so it could easily come back to Parliament, and Parliament would turn around and go, no, we're not voting for your deal, it's rubbish. Because remember, the referendum is not legally binding. I mean, it's just like with the original referendum. Parliament, the next time it sat, could have all stood up and said, right, how did the voting go? Oh, 52% voted to leave. Yeah, we're not doing that. That's a really stupid idea. We've been elected to look after the interests of the country. We're not leaving the EU. And then when it was discovered about the massive amount of criminality associated with the various leave campaigns, Parliament could have gone, hang on a minute. No, this is really bad. We ought to halt these proceedings and investigate further. We'll put it off indefinitely. No, they didn't do any of that, but they could have done. And the same here. So by MPs voting for her deal, what they'd be doing is not ratifying her deal as such. What they'd be doing is saying that if the referendum result was that we still want to leave and that we want to leave under May's deal, that Parliament then will have effectively voted in favour of that. So then they would have to ratify it. That's the benefit there. The downside for Theresa May is, although it gets her deal through, it divides her party because she'd be getting a load of Labour MPs voting for it, not all of them, but a load of them, enough to pass it along with her MPs, but a load of Conservative MPs voting against it. And of course, these are the ones who are threatening to split the party. So I don't expect her to support that. So I don't expect it to work. But that is one way in which the motion could be substantially changed. Another tactic could just be to change, I suppose, the session of Parliament. Remember, it's not to say she can never bring this back again. She just can't bring it back in the same Parliament. Now, the next session of Parliament basically ends at summertime. You have summer recess and then they come back after summer. I suppose we could seek a long extension with the plan being, and then we'll have another vote after summer. I'm not really sure the EU would see that as much of a plan, but we could ask for that reason. It might even be possible to bring forward the end of the session. We could just say, right, we're going to, because what else are they going to do? I mean, they could get on with domestic policy. That would make a change. But ultimately, they could, the Parliament could say, well, let's just call an end to this session and then start the next session quite early as well. I'm not sure about the rules on that, but I hardly think they're set in stone. I imagine a majority of Parliament could vote for that. But as I say, the EU might not think that putting her deal up for a third vote is much of a plan, especially as it might mean going beyond the EU elections. Also, as I say, unless we can bring forward the end of this parliamentary session and then start the new one in, say, a month's time or something. Besides, Parliament might not actually vote in favour of that, because it's almost like a vote in favour of her deal. As there isn't a majority in favour of her deal, there might not be a majority in favour of doing it, because all it's doing is facilitating her deal, isn't it? So yeah, Parliament probably wouldn't even vote for that. Now, someone asked me if this makes no deal more likely. Now, Brexiteers are loving this ruling, so you might think so, but actually it makes it less likely, in my opinion. It's only opinion. Basically, the situation, as I saw it, if this motion was allowed, was probably going to be that May wouldn't have moved it this week anyway. She hasn't got the support. Ministers have already been saying that Theresa May is unlikely to put it up for a vote unless she really believes that it'll pass. She hasn't got it. She hasn't got the support. So she'd have likely moved it to next week, the last week of Brexit, and after the EU summit, thus wasting the EU summit as a potential for negotiations here. And with only a day or two left before Brexit. That, for me, made no deal a real serious possibility. But I want to expand on some of that in another video. Now, with this ruling, if May refuses to substantially change her motion, it actually means her deal is off the table. At least for this month, and at least until they can arrange for another session of Parliament with us still being in the EU. That means she really does need a substantial extension. Come what may, doesn't matter what the plan is. There's nothing, unless they can really bring forward the end of Parliament really quickly and start the next one really quickly. And again, that would surely have to have a majority of Parliament. I don't think the Prime Minister can do that. I'm not sure about the rules on that. It's so weird. Everything at the moment is unknown. But assuming they can't do that, it basically means an extension of a few months is now useless. Unless, of course, we just say, right, no deal it is, and we just want a technical extension. That's the only use for a short one now. So she's like forced to negotiate a long one. And that might suit many in the EU as well. Because, yeah, I don't think it's time enough to start a new session of Parliament. And I'm quite sure a short one isn't time enough to do another referendum. So why are Brexiteer MPs so happy with the ruling? Because they think it will give Theresa May ammunition to go to the EU and get them to crack and give us our unicorn cake. I'm not kidding, that's actually what they're saying. They may not have mentioned unicorns and cakes, but they do still say that they believe that faced with no deal, if Theresa May says, well, it's no deal then because they're not voting for my deal, the EU will suddenly back down and remove the backstop. Which, of course, would substantially change it, and then MPs could then vote for it the day after the summit or something. That's what's going in their heads. Very genuinely, at least it's what they're saying. I don't know what they're thinking, but it is at least what they are publicly saying. They think that is the way the events of this EU summit are going to pan out. Theresa May goes to them, says, sorry, it looks like no deal. And the EU go, oh, no, what can we do? Can we do anything? Well, you could remove the backstop, I suppose, but only if you really want to. Oh, yeah, totally, yeah, we'll remove that. That's what goes on in their heads. So that is what makes no deal still a deadly possibility, the fact that you've got that brainless sort of thinking. I would like to think Theresa May's not actually going to try that stupidity, or if she does, it'll be knocked out of her pretty quickly by all the EU members of heads of government. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But the fact that I don't think she'd be that stupid, or if she was, that she'd be slapped down pretty quickly, means that in reality, she's going to have to use this summit to arrange an extension for something that is not her deal. That, to me, makes it less likely. It doesn't mean it's unlikely. I just think it makes it less likely, if anything, that we're going to have a no deal. But it still does, of course, depend on what our plan is for the extension. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense of a few things. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, click the bell notification as well. And until next time, I'll see you later.